Welcome back to the SportsMax Zone. There now appears to be some semblance of normalcy at Caymanas Park as racing will again continue on Saturday with a 10-race card. Earlier this month, 2 race days were cancelled following a standoff between racing stakeholders and the promoting company Supreme Ventures Racing. The rift between the parties was the result of the stakeholders rejecting a $27 million purse increase proposed by Supreme Ventures Racing, while the United Racehorse Trainers Association has not fully embraced the resumption of racing. The Thoroughbred Owners and Breeders Association, Toba, has urged stakeholders to support nominations for race meets as advertised by the promoting company. We're now joined in the studio by Ainsley Walters, he is CEO of Toba, and Desmond Lewis, Vice President of Toba. Gentlemen, welcome to the SportsMax Zone. Last week we had the trainers' boss here, Patrick Smelly, discussing the issue, and I saw subsequent to that where Toba had issued a release, and there was a release from Supreme Ventures as well, that a meeting between you two had come to some favourable position that would chart the way forward for this issue to be settled. Ainsley, let me start with you. What exactly did that meeting propose, and how solid is racing at the moment, given what happened 2 weekends ago?
Well, that meeting, Lance, was preceded by Toba meeting with the trainers group, the trainers executive led by Mr. Smelly, Maurice Crooks, and Dale Murphy, I believe, because we really wanted to hear from the trainers firsthand, because they were the ones negotiating in the main, along with some former JROA members who had signed a deed, which led to everything. So we met with the trainers, we heard what the trainers had to say, and we formulated 4 points with which to meet with SVREL. We met with SVREL, and it was a very good meeting, I must say. Myself, Vice President Lewis, along with Garwin Tuller, Director, and Andrew Azar, we were the persons in attendance with that meeting with SVREL reps. Of course, it was a testy meeting at times, but at the end of it, we came out with an understanding that, listen, this whole 6.2 as opposed to $5.3 billion thing was settled by the Betting, Gaming and Lotteries Commission, and listen, we have to forge a way forward. We put our proposals to them, and SVREL said they would look into whatever is happening, and we left there with the intent to have further dialogue, which led to us, Toba, saying to the owners, say, listen, gentlemen, this is a situation. Let's get this thing back up and running in earnest.
All right. Mr. Lewis, as Vice President of Toba, let me ask you this, because I saw some video of the meeting, the contentious Tuesday meeting, where it seemed that there was a lot of anger and a lot of dissent on both sides. And your president, Howard Hamilton, who has probably 40 plus 50 years experience in the racing industry, was particularly angry with Supreme Ventures Racing and Entertainment Limited. And Ainsley just outlined in a nutshell the sort of discussion that afforded us the opportunity to have some discussion that at least we could describe as favorable to the racing industry's continuation. Can you, in a nutshell, say what was the sticking point or the reversal position that made this meeting favorable? Because when we saw the moods and the tempers flaring, it didn't appear to me that any kind of understanding or any kind of middle ground would be attained easily.
Well, thank you for having us, Lance. I must say, the president himself, Mr. Howard Hamilton, he has been in racing for my lifetime.
Yes.
And that is something that has to be respected.
I was a teenager when he owned horses, like
yes.
Mouton, Cadet, and some horses that Jose Pinchin trained.
Yes.
And I liked him as an owner because he always used Emilio Rodriguez, who was my favorite jockey.
Sure. So he has to be respected.
Yes.
And his views are very important to us going forward. So I must highlight that first and foremost. But the sticking point, Lance, is the discussion between the 6.2 million and the 5.3. One, information from the BGLC of 6.2 and 5.3 from the Supreme Ventures Race and Entertainment Limited. That was a sticking point. Now, I'm going to add something to it, Lance. You know, a deed was signed. And if the deed was adhered to, if it was monitored and the stakeholders, to include us on this side, along with the promoting company, had looked at the deed and monitor and work along with the deed, we wouldn't have been in this position. The truth, I will just point three things, Lance. In the deed, there is a review process in the deed, and that review process speaks to three things. It speaks to a 6-month review when all the numbers are given from or by SVREL accounts chief accountant. Secondly, a all parties agreement to this deed or in agreement with this deed must meet and review the deed every 6 months. And third and most importantly, there has to be meeting by both parties in a collaborative effort to seek solution for any situation that may arise on a monthly basis. So put it this way, if those meetings were held, we wouldn't have been in this situation. And I must point to you that we would have been bullish, pushing Chairman Sharp to have discussions, have meetings to prevent the withholding of nominations. So I must point that. So we, on our part, while we slacked up a little in terms of not having the monthly meetings, we tried to push as much as possible to get the meetings. The disparity between the 6.2 and the 5.3 brought about because of the BGLC. We were waiting on the BGLC to provide us with the information before we could continue or settle the discussion, because it's not a negotiation. It's a discussion that is set out as part of the deed. The principles are clear. In the deed, it clearly speaks to simulcast racing. But there's one element that is missing, and that's the intertote protocol system that creates a contention. And let me just point to you what the intertote protocol system is. It's a clearinghouse. It's a secondary tote that feeds into Caymanas Park tote system, but it doesn't speak in terms of the monies coming to SVREL, and that is what creates the disparity in terms of the numbers.
I think Sharp made that point, didn't he?
So that is what created the disparity.
Yes.
However, we push with Solomon Sharp to have a discussion, and if those discussions were had, what happened to prevent 30,000 plus persons from being out of employment for tourist meet would not have happened. Yeah. But going forward, we are going to ensure that the deed in itself, we look at elements of the deed, and based on the discussions that we have had with SVREL, they would have taken the pointers and the suggestions that we made, because we made proposals. And those proposals, one, is to ensure that we include those monies, because you're paying extra taxes for 4 years and not knowing. It's only when the situation comes about, then you recognize. So we have proposed to them to include that sum, which is about 41
Are they likely to accept that proposal?
They are very favorable to it. I must say they thought about it and said they will get back to us, so the discussions continue. So at least there's a path forward. And there are several other proposals that we have made that include the GRC, and those will wait a little bit before we divulge information on those.
Ainsley, I was keen with the chronology of these discussions, because when I saw the press release come out, both from Toba and Supreme Ventures Racing and Entertainment Limited, it appeared to me as if it had come out about 5 days after you actually had the meeting. So it seems to me that during the week, there were things happening behind the scenes that were favorable to racing returning. But in that same week, we had Patrick Smelly here from the trainers group, and he was still adamant that he wasn't embracing of the position as it was at the point, to the extent that he said he wouldn't be at races last week, Saturday. And that gave me the impression that the trainers group was still adamant or still in a standoff mode. But you're suggesting to me, Ainsley, that your group has had recent discussions with the trainers group, and they may be a little bit more understanding now than they were last week. Correct me if I'm wrong.
No, that's not entirely so. We haven't had a discussion per se with the trainers group.
Yeah.
We had that discussion with the trainers group on the eve
Of your meeting?
Of meeting,
Yes.
SVREL.
Yes.
And in fact, our letter, our correspondence to owners went out the following day, I believe. No, it went out the same evening.
That would have been Monday?
Yes, it went out the same evening.
Yes.
I was widely distributed the following day. Mm-hmm. So I believe that Mr. Smelly.
Would that be last Monday or 2 Mondays ago?
Last Monday.
This Monday that just went? Okay. After the Saturday 6-day race card?
Yes.
Yes.
So let me just give you some background
Yes.
to it, Lance. We have met with the Trainers Association, Ertaj.
Because they are very important.
Yes, they're very important.
Yes.
They're a very important part. And kudos to Patrick and his team.
Yes.
They have done a sterling job. And as he indicated that they have been the one who have been leading all the discussions prior to now. But we recognize that owners are the ones who are paying the bills. Let me point though that approximately 70% of the horses are owned by trainers. And it is important for us to have clear discussions and understanding as to how we lead the discussion for purse increases. So they must be respected. But let me put it this way, Lance. The sticking point, while every discussion that you have, you expect something good from it. The sticking point where the discussions are concerned is between SVREL, the numbers from BGLC, and that is what created the problem.
Yeah, it was an issue of trust. Because I think in listening to the trainers and some of the owners group, including Mr. Howard Hamilton, your Toba president, it did appear that there was a breakdown in trust. In other words, they were feeling that Supreme Ventures Racing and Entertainment Limited were profiting to a level that they weren't honest about, which flavored how much they were willing to give as a purse increase. Well, and the stakeholders felt, given what they felt, they knew that they were being shortchanged.
And I point to it initially, Lance, that it is important to understand the intertote portfolio system.
Yes.
As I pointed out, for simulcast racing, that was inserted as part of the deed.
Yes.
But for local racing, the inflows, the income on local racing was never inserted as part of the deed.
Yes.
So if the people misunderstood, so to speak, there definitely would have to be a lack of trust. Because if one figure was given by the BGLC, who's the oversight authority, and another figure by the promoters, and there's significant disparity, you will understand exactly why you have the distrust. But once BGLC came out and agreed those numbers, it was important for us to, as a group, go back based on the sticking point.
All right, Desmond, you said something that was startling to me just now, that 70% of the trainers' cohort own horses or are owners. Is that a statistic that has been long-standing? Because I'm of the impression that 20, 30 years ago that may not have been so.
It has not been.
Yes.
Well, let me point something to you, Lance.
And why is this now
We're in
happening?
changing times.
Yes.
Back then, you had people with significant disposable income.
Yes.
Today, most of these people that you have who are involved in racing use racing as a business, as an investment. And that is the reason why the dynamics is very important when it comes on to negotiating. Because when you're negotiating for people with disposable income, as against people who have invested their hard-earned cash, it is difficult. And that is why you have to strike the balance and ensure that you get it right. And that's what we at Toba are trying to do, to protect the people on the lower side and to protect those persons on the higher side.
Yeah, Ainsley, when I spoke with Patrick last week, and it's an issue that I've discussed many times on the show, that the racing industry in many jurisdictions struggles without some supporting arm of income. I made the point on the show before that racetracks in North America have been known to close down because they have not been able to have like a casino working alongside the racing industry to support the income, which tells me that for racing to be profitable, it is not easy. I see even in the Caribbean here, where Trinidad and Tobago's racing at the moment is in a coma. I'm not sure how much longer it will last. Barbados is hanging on, and to Supreme Ventures Racing and Entertainment Limited's credit, I think the Jamaican racing industry has done reasonably well, especially with the COVID situation and so on. But from a Toba perspective, because the Thoroughbred Owners and Breeders Association would have to be a critical arm of the racing industry, how optimistic are you that the racing industry in Jamaica can be profitable and can flourish?
All right, Lance, the point that you just made regarding other sources of income stream to support horse racing internationally, there's no way it can work in Jamaica. Nothing is unique about Jamaica, why Jamaica should be able to pull it off, and jurisdictions such as North America, certainly the UK and Hong Kong can't do it.
Yes.
In the UK, there is the bookmakers levy. In North America, no North American track, not one, from Gulfstream to Woodbine, and as far as those in the northern climes, can survive without casino money or a casino. So, for example, New York, Naira, big jurisdictions, Saratoga, Belmont, and Aqueduct. It is the casino money. Years ago, the state had to come in to rescue Naira from private hands. The state turned around Naira, but Naira became profitable. Private interests started looking at Naira again, and the state asked them one question: how are you going to pay the purses? And that was the end of that conversation. Right? It didn't continue after that, and Naira has remained in the state of New York's hands since. At Gulfstream here, you had Calder. Now, about 2 years ago, it was, Governor DeSantis, down there in Florida, he looked at the money that the Seminoles were bringing in from their casinos and said, hold on. One of the requirements in Florida, it was that you had to have some form of pari-mutuel betting, and the obvious one was horse racing, to have a casino. When DeSantis looked at what was happening with the Seminoles expanding their casinos and raking in big bucks, Calder no longer wanted to have a racetrack there. And DeSantis said, sure. But guess what was happening, Lance? A lot of money was coming in from Calder's casino into Gulfstream. Yeah. Gulfstream people say, hey, you still have to give us some money. You know that you have a casino loan. And the people at Calder said, no, go to hell. It is our money.
Yeah, I remember Calder was a big racetrack in the 70s, 80s, 90s.
So, Lance, no racetrack anywhere can survive on just sales alone to fulfill purse money.
So how will Supreme Ventures Racing and Entertainment
Now, Lance, you just mentioned Toba's role.
Yes.
A private entity cannot approach government to say, go tax X, Y, or Z to support us. That would be a very big backlash, right, throughout society. The industry, led by Toba, has to look at means and ways and identify sources and prod the government and ask the entire industry to come together and say, listen, here, look at this source, look at this source. Give racing a percentage from this, that, or whatever gaming enterprises are out there. Yeah. Well, one of the reasons, Lance, the big reasons why Naira will take, the state of New York will take monies from casinos and pump into horse racing, which is another betting industry, is that when you look at the jobs, it starts from agriculture, because remember, like a breeding industry. Yeah. It's an entire ecosystem that racing supports. It's huge compared to a one-armed bandit or somebody just sitting down. So the state of New York says, listen, we want to protect all these jobs in the racing industry. And it's the same thing with Jamaica. You have to protect, listen, look at Portmore. Portmore is really a racing, horse racing gives so much to Portmore. You have the farms on the Bernard Lodge side. Yeah. You have several OTBs in Portmore. You have the stables, everything, an entire infrastructure. Yes. And it pulls, the labor that it pulls is from the bottom end of the labor rung. You can't just sit back and not give back something from somewhere. And that's where Toba has to now take the lead to say, listen, government, racing needs a subsidy.
During your contentious meeting, Ainsley, I remember Howard Hamilton putting it to Solomon Sharp chairman of SVREL, that if you're struggling, ask the government to help. The Solomon Sharp didn't respond favorably at the time, and I'm not sure how he feels about that. But I guess based on the how volatile the meeting was and the atmosphere was, it would have been hard at that point for people to reason or to argue reasonably, and with the emotions running high and so on. But the point that Ainsley just made about racing being more than a sport and being an industry is part of the reason why racing survived COVID. Because you remember, during the COVID period, there are a lot of other sporting organizations who were complaining, that the Ministry of Sport and the government wouldn't allow other sports to go on, but yet racing was going on. And I think that speaks to the point Ainsley just made about racing being an industry that employs thousands and thousands of people, as opposed to just being a sport.
It employs upward of 30,000 lands.
30,000?
Upward of 30,000. Directly?
Yes.
And indirectly. And that speaks for itself. I don't think any politician need any prodding. If they understand, they would support racing. Because think about the people at the lowest scale.
Are you in support of the government injecting support for the racing industry?
There are ways that the government can support.
Okay.
Many, many ways that the government can support.
But it is Supreme Ventures Racing and Entertainment's responsibility to...
Lance, if you look at it, and you said Howard Hamilton prod
I heard it myself.
Sharp.
Yeah.
Chairman Sharp could not respond because there's a number of implications if they approach the government. Remember,
so they can't.
They can't.
Which is what you were saying.
It is difficult for them to do it.
Yes.
But let me point, credit must be given to SVREL for trying very hard to improve the sport. However, SVREL must understand that for the sport to be improved, the people who make it happen, that creates the production, which are the owners, the breeders, the jockeys, and the grooms, must be satisfied. We're not asking for everything. We're not asking for too much. All we're asking for is our share of the pie. It is important for us to be comfortable so that racing can continue beyond my lifetime and your lifetime. What we're doing at Toba is to create a framework, the groundwork, so that other people, other persons, that foundation has to be created. And we are looking at various ways and means to make it happen.
The importation, Ainsley, of foreign horses to inject more quality in the breeding industry has been scuppered by over decades an unwillingness of the government to afford waivers to bring in horses. I remember Wayne DaCosta complaining about that bitterly before he passed on. Is that something that racing needs to improve the product?
Certainly, Lance, because over the years, partly because of the reason you mentioned just now, government, there was once, they did renege at some point, but then we went back on. And recently, the GCT was removed.
I think I remember that.
Yes, recently.
Probably
just
within the last year.
Only to be gazetted.
So that process is ongoing now, and I believe that, for the October, in October, Toba should be going up. A representative from Toba should be going up to probably the Ocala yearling sale to get some horses in, because the money should be released by then for Toba to acquire some horses to include in our yearling sale.
Yearling sale, trying to improve the bloodstock.
As far as the overall breeding industry is concerned, Lance, we have to take a serious look at our bloodstock. The feed sizes have fallen off badly. The overall quality of the thoroughbred has also fallen off. I am certainly not one that is used to a two-horse classic, right? I'm way back, with the big fields. You have 8 8 or so runners having chances and so on, and these are not normally who gets to the front and wins the race. You know, it was a total race. And we definitely need to return to that stage, Lance. Our local breeding industry definitely needs to be resuscitated, and that can only be done by, once again, importing quality animals and getting into the system. So kudos to the current administration, the government, to having lifted again the GCT from the removal of thoroughbreds.
And just to add to what Ainsley just said, Lance, we are now paying at Toba. We're paying full subsidy from 2017 to 2021, Ainsley?
To 2020.
2020,
yes.
We're paying full subsidy as an incentive to ensure that we attract more breeders.
We're just in the fine-tuning.
More breeders.
Yeah, we're fine-tuning
because
that.
that's important.
So possibly in another 2 weeks or so, we should be sending out, because this hasn't been done in a while, and the breeders really need that support. So we'll be sending out a list for people to contact Toba, and we arrange getting their full subsidies.
Okay, well, gentlemen, we're going to wrap here, but we were a couple of weeks ago very, very nervous about the state of racing just a couple of weeks before the Jamaica Derby, which will be run in a matter of a week and a half from now. It's the biggest race day in any jurisdiction, the Derby, and it's good to hear from a Toba perspective that you are taking the lead in trying to ensure that the racing dispute that we've had over the past couple of weeks, although it actually started long before that, but it came to the fore a couple of weeks ago. Serious efforts are being made to sort the problem out and have racing on the up. Thanks, gentlemen.
Thank you very much.
Okay, that's Ainsley Walters and Desmond Lewis from Toba Thoroughbred Owners and Breeders Association talking about the clearing up of the standoff between stakeholders and Supreme Ventures Racing and Entertainment Limited that threatened horse racing in Jamaica a couple of weeks ago. Fairly big card coming up this weekend. There is holiday racing on Tuesday as well, and the following weekend and the week after that, it will be the Jamaica Derby and the Oaks. Big horse racing coming up at Caymanas Park. Back with more on The Zone after this.